Stop the insanity. Get your focus back onto what really matters in life. Your faith, your family, your finances, and your future. Sit back, listen, and change the trajectory of your life. You are listening to the Money for Life podcast. Let's welcome your hosts, Teresa Kuhn and Rick Sapio.
Hello, everybody. This is Teresa Kuhn and my partner, Rick Sapio, and Money for Life. And today I'm really excited about the topic. It's how to work in the 21st century. And it's based on a book that Rick Sapio has read and studied and has talked about for a very long time. And I want to open today with this quote. Most people have lost the ability to go deep, spending their days instead in a frantic blur of email and social media, not even realizing there is a better way. Can you relate to that? I know I absolutely can. Some days, my days are a frantic blur. Rick, I know you've studied this and you've got some very strong takeaways from the book, Deep Work.
Yeah, our goal with Money for Life is to have massive impact on you. And the things that Teresa and I talk about are always things that you could put on the ground immediately. And they're all interrelated. So we'll never surprise you with a topic. Everything is interrelated to how to improve and get exponential results in the four categories. And that's your faith, your family, your finances, and your future. This is absolutely, positively, for me, one of the most impactful things that I've read and I've learned and I've studied. And Cal Newport, who's a very celebrated author, I was shocked to see that he had 3,000 reviews on Amazon for his book, Deep Work. I read his follow-on book, Digital Minimalism. But here's the reality for all of us. The reality is that we have trained ourselves through our societal choices to have incredibly short attention spans. Incredibly short. We have talked about this in the past, but it's worth repeating. If you were to consider in America today, the average time that an adult spends in one-on-one conversation, eyeball to eyeball, with their children in a given day, in an average day, is less than 30 seconds total. That is absolutely insane. We're not talking about driving them somewhere and yelling at them. We're not talking about barking orders. We're talking about conversation, eyeball to eyeball, without staring at the same screen, conversation. That's sad. So how did this come about? This came about because we live in a society that is addicted to yes. You got to have every app. You got to be on every email platform. You got to respond to people. You wake up in the morning and it's a blur of emails to catch up on and text messages and Facebook posts, and everyone's reaching for you. And you know what? You don't realize you have choice in the matter. So Cal Newport unveils this topic this way. He says, if you can imagine decades ago, people would go to work prior to computers and fax machines and all of that, and they would actually do deep work. If you were a scientist, you went to a lab and you checked in and you did work. You actually focused on something meaningful to your career for long periods of time without breaks. Fast forward to today, the average executive takes a break, depending on what study you read, every 13 seconds. So you start writing an email and you look down at your cell phone. Once you look down at your cell phone, it's pinging because people don't realize that they can shut their damn notifications off, shut them all off. I have never received a notification on anything, anytime ever. My wife asked me, well, how do you know if you have an email? I say, well, when I sit down to check emails, I go to my emails and I'll see some emails to respond to. When it's time to check text, I go do that. So, Teresa, you are representing the audience today. What is the audience thinking right now?
The audience is relating. They're getting it, and they're probably thinking, yes, I've tried to block out time, or yes, I've tried to turn off notifications, but I either get sucked back into it because, I need to make sure that I'm there for my child if they need me, or my spouse if they need me, or my business partner if they need me, because that's more urgent and more important than me being focused. So it's not easy. There's also the dopamine hit. There's the addiction part of it. We are addicted to the notifications. addictions. The people that create this technology, they're very aware. They're very smart. They know that we are addicted to our phones, our computers. They build into their apps the response to give us that dopamine hit.
Here's the big question. If we know that these are addictive devices, why are we handing them to our children? Why, if you Google this, all of you listening, why was Steve Jobs, the inventor of the iPhone, why was he a low-tech parent? And then read about all of these tech titans in Silicon Valley. They were low-tech parents, i.e., they knew how addictive the devices were. They didn't give them to their own children, yet billions of people around the world have decided it's okay to give these devices to kids.
Rick, you've got 4 little kids. You hang out with kids, friends of your kids, etc. So isn't it sad when you see like these babies, 1, 2, 3-year-olds grabbing their phones from their parents and playing games on them? You know, their brains are being hardwired at a very, very delicate stage in their development to be hooked to those games. And I'm not saying holier than thou, I'm better. I don't know what kind of parent I would have been when my son was little. I don't know. I would like to think that I would have known better. But what are our kids going to look like when they're 15, 18? What are they going to be like adults?
Well, we already know. We have the research. First of all, there was a project in which Apple was trying to figure out what new apps to come out with, and they were working in partnership with a marketing firm. And they decided to interview 6-year-olds, and they put the 6-year-olds in a room, and they did the observation study where they're behind a mirror. You can look this up. And the app that the 6-year-olds came up with was an app that was a button on a phone that they can go up to the phone and hit the button and shut the phone down, because they were sick of seeing their parents distracted on their phones instead of playing with them. It takes a 6-year-old to figure this out. But what is happening now is adults are handing these devices to their kids. So what happens? They get addicted at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 year. And then we all know there's porn addiction in the United States. The average 15-year-old boy in the United States is, depending on what study you read, is addicted to pornography. And shockingly, girls are as well. So we're giving them the gun. We're giving them the bullets, and we're saying, don't shoot yourself. That's what these devices are. So that's one aspect of deep work, is the massive amount of distraction. The other side of this is, why aren't we so passionate about what we're doing in life, with our families, with our careers, with our passions, with our hobbies, etc.? Why aren't we focusing on the topics that we talk about in this podcast so much so that we ignore the noise, we ignore the nonsense, we control our lives? And I've got a quick story about that. I work out and have been working out with a friend of mine for 25 years. He was addicted to his phone like many of us are. And he went to the locker room and left his phone out one day. And I grabbed his phone and I shut off every single solitary notification. He had an Apple device, and I guess I don't know anything about how these devices work, but I found notifications on settings and I just shut them all off. Didn't say anything to him, put his phone back down. And about 3 weeks later, I could absolutely see a different human being. His name is Randy. And he goes, it's really weird. I don't know when it happened, but my phone stopped notifying me. I was getting notifications for everything, and it stopped. And I have total peace. Something that takes 30 seconds will change your life. And you know what's weird? Very few people will do it. And you mentioned something about parents need to stay connected. A very close friend of mine has a son who's 20 years old who got the opportunity to go to Italy for a semester from college. Kid went to Italy for the semester and COVID hit. And this family was absolutely frantic about getting their 20-year-old from Italy back home. And the 20-year-old was like, I don't really want to go home. I'm here. I'll learn the language. I'm with a family. All is good, mom and dad. But they were frantic about COVID and all this other stuff. I recently had a conversation with this kid about this whole thing. And I said, what happened? And they're like, my parents were so connected that they didn't want me out of their sight. They're constantly emailing me and calling me. It was driving me nuts. So I came home because of that. So I sat down with the dad and I said, let me ask you a question. You had your son at 20 in a new country, living with a family, safe, learning a new language, learning a life experience. Do you know what he would have talked about for the rest of his life? He would have talked about the fact that he was in Italy, by the way, in the safest part of Italy in the south, when COVID hit. And he got to stay there for 7 months. Wouldn't that have been an incredible story to share for the rest of her life? You know what he's saying now? I was home with my parents, locked in, getting yelled at every day. And the point of all that is we have forgotten as parents to leave our kids alone. We're trying to raise independent adults that are not connected and addicted, independent adults that can do deep work. So the whole point of this podcast is that I believe we have a duty to find out what our purpose and passions are in the world and cut out all the nonsense and all the crap, because we're raising a generation of kids. You can read about this in the book. It's called Deep Work by Cal Newport, that cannot and will not ever be able to focus because we started them young. We started the leash. We got to be connected to them. We can't let them out of our sight. And you think about your childhood, you would go off for days at a time, who knows where, with who knows who. And guess what? You're able to hear this podcast decades later. So Teresa, how do you feel about your relationship with your son? I know you and your husband had a hard time having children in the first place, and you got this incredible son, and you are connected to him electronically. How does a parent deal with this, how do I say, wrestling match between wanting your son or your daughter to be independent, but at the same time wanting to be connected all the time?
It's difficult, and I'm going to sound sexist here, but I think it's easier for dads than moms. I think moms are wired a little bit differently when it comes to heart connection, safety. I think it is a little bit different. I have conversations with moms all the time about this very topic. There are ways to track your child on a phone. I had a girlfriend just tell me last week, we were talking about driving, and her daughter's been driving about 3 or 4 years, and she still worries. And she still tracks her daughter on her phone when she's driving. And her daughter, of course, knows. And she says, as long as I'm paying for your phone, you've got to have that tracer on there. So it's a challenge. I think what you're saying is spot on. One issue I will say that we talk about in terms of 100 years, the actions that we take today inform our life 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years. And the technology does something that's terrible when it comes to delayed gratification. And the studies have shown the more a child can learn to delay gratification, the more successful they will be. And why is that? Because they're willing to make better decisions short term for a long-term gain, for long-term reward. Well, the technology does the exact opposite. The technology is rewarding for immediate gratification. It's the immediate dopamine hits. So we have generations now, generations that have been trained getting rewarded for the dopamine, for the instant gratification. And how are they going to make decisions that are good for their long term? They're not trained to do that. Their neurology is not trained to do that.
You're 100% right. And this is what started this whole project with you and I, which ultimately ended up with Money for Life, is we wrote 4 books on 100-year thinking, 100-year education, 100-year financial solution, 100-year money mindset, et cetera, et cetera. We will have many more books about it, but we're trying to shift the mindset of our culture from short-term immediate gratification to long-term. So what's the main idea of this podcast? The main idea is if you are unwilling to create pockets of time in your day in which you're completely cut off from all the electronics. I don't bring my cell phone into my home, never have. When I'm at work, I block all that out and I block my calendar. When am I doing podcasts with Teresa? When am I reading? When am I having phone calls? When am I checking emails? When am I checking texts and whatnot? And I've trained myself to not feed negative, toxic relationships, because that's another thing that creates more touch points, etc. So I believe that all of us that want to master these 4 categories of life that we talk about often have to figure out how to cut out all the noise. And we're so committed to all the people that we meet online and the friends. When you think about it, on your deathbed, how many of your Facebook friends are going to be around the bed wishing you goodbye? And the answer is 0. The only people that are going to be around your deathbed are the ones that probably are close family members or very close friends that you've committed to, that you've passionately cared about, that you gave one-on-one time, that you experienced life with, not these quick hit notification types of things. So why should you do this? Teresa and I both live this way for the most part. And we're trying to give you tips and secrets so that you can have better connections in your family and ultimately have success in the 4 areas that we're constantly pounding on these podcasts. The only way to have more faith and richer family relationships, more wealth in your finance category, and ultimately have a better future is you've got to be present to your life. You've got to cut the noise out. Many people laugh at me, but we don't have a connected TV in our home. We just decided that who wants that crap news, which is paid for by advertisers, by the way. It's really entertainment. It's not news. Who wants that crap in their homes? And when I walk into a home where the TV's on all the time, you notice the difference. It's like this negative energy, this hum of nastiness that permeates the place. So I think what's in it for us is a better, richer, more fulfilling life at the end of the day. And that's why we want you to embrace this topic of deep work. We want you to embrace this topic of cutting out the noise. We want you to embrace this topic of having a fulfilling life, because ultimately you win, we win, the world wins.
Very well said. And I will say, you've trained people around you to respect your boundaries in that regard. I have parking lots for people. I have meetings like you on a regular basis. We put things on lists to discuss. Unless an emergency, Rick, you're not getting phone calls from me. If you get a phone call from me, it's odd. If I get a phone call from you, it's odd. We have parking lots. We have time specified for our meetings, and we have an agenda for those meetings.
Yeah, let me explain what Teresa means, because this is a really important point. So you've got a bunch of people in your life. So let me use myself as an example. My wife is a very important person, and I know whenever I have something to tell her, rather than leaving a voicemail or calling her repeatedly or emailing her or texting her, whatever, I just put it in the parking lot. It's a list, and I keep a list on all my important relationships, and so does Teresa, of the next time I talk to my wife, which is typically on our date night, here's some things I want to talk about. The next time I talk to Teresa, here's what I want to talk about. And I just go to the list. And what this does is it simplifies communication, because it avoids, did you get that text? Did you get that voicemail? Did you get that email? And that will still happen, but it minimizes it because you have that confidence that every Wednesday at 4 p.m., I'm going to be on the phone with you. And I have these preset meetings. Some are monthly, some are quarterly, some are annually, in fact, with my financial planner. But it's fixed. And I don't call my financial planner every time I have a question. I just put it on the list and wait for that opportunity. This is an absolute maximizer of time. So thank you for bringing that up, Teresa.
Rick, great conversation. I think one of the reasons I love doing Money for Life is I get so much out of it. I remember, and you bring top of mind, what we're doing here brings top of mind so many important things to live just a really wonderful, great life. And we know life is not easy. We're not saying any of this stuff is easy, but in terms of maybe easy action items you can do right now. Number one, turn off the notifications on your phone. Number two, set up a parking lot, set up a spreadsheet or a document for the important people in your life and start training them. Hey, you talk to, I don't know, a coworker or an employee or a spouse in terms of important stuff, you set a time, and just on that set time every single week, you're going to put on that parking lot just the items that you need to discuss, an agenda. And it does simplify so much of your life. And you know what it does? It reduces the noise in your brain or the chatter in your brain about who you need to talk to and what you need to talk to them about. It absolutely simplifies life for sure.
Well, thank you for listening to another episode of Money for Life. Teresa, always great to explore these topics with you. And audience, thank you so much for the feedback and the emails and the messages. It's great to find like-minded people in the world that want to promulgate this message. So have an awesome day.
You have just experienced Money for Life. Implement these strategies today and create a life by design. Have a blessed day.